The good to great companies understood a simple truth. Tremendous power exists in the fact of continued improvement and the delivery of results. Point to tangible accomplishments, however incremental at first, and show how these steps fit into the context of an overall concept that will work. And when you do this in such a way that people see and feel the buildup of momentum, they will line up with enthusiasm. We came to call this the flywheel effect, and it applies not only to outside investors, but also to inside people. Let me share a story from the research. At a pivotal point in the study, members of the team nearly revolted. Throwing their interview notes on the table, they demanded, "Do we have to keep asking that stupid question?" My response, yes. And second, what stupid question? Well, that one about commitment, alignment, and how they managed change. That's not a stupid question, I replied. It's one of the most important. Well, said one of the team members, a lot of the executives who made the transition, they think it's a stupid question. Some don't even understand the question. Yes, we do need to keep asking it. We need to be consistent across the interviews. And besides, it's even more interesting that they don't understand the question. Keep probing. We've got to understand how they overcame resistance to change and got people lined up. I have to be honest here. I fully expected to find that getting everyone lined up, creating alignment, to use the jargon, would be one of the top challenges faced by executives working to turn good into great. After all, nearly every executive who'd visited the laboratory had asked this question in one form or another. How do we get the boat turned? How do we get people committed to the new vision? How do we motivate people to line up? How do we get people to embrace change? Wrong questions. To my great surprise, we did not find the question of alignment to be a key challenge faced by the good to great leaders. Clearly, the good to great companies did get incredible alignment and commitment. They artfully managed change, but they never really spent much time thinking about it. It was transparent to them. And it taught us a big lesson. We learned that under the right conditions, the problems of commitment, alignment, motivation, and change just melt away. They largely take care of themselves. Think about Kroger. How do you get a company of over 50,000 people, checkers and baggers and shelf stockers and produce washers and so forth, to embrace a radical new strategy that would eventually change virtually every aspect of how the company builds and runs grocery stores? The answer? You don't. Not in one big program, or event anyway. Jim Herring, the Level 5 who initiated the transformation of Kroger, told us that he avoided any attempts at hoopla and motivation. Instead, he and his team began turning the flywheel, creating tangible evidence that their plans made sense. We presented what we were doing in such a way that people saw our accomplishments, said Herring. We tried to bring our plans to successful conclusion step by step, so that the mass of people would gain confidence from the successes, not just the words. Herring understood that the way to get people lined up behind a bold new vision is to turn the flywheel consistent with that vision, from 2 turns to 4, then 4 to 8, then 8 to 16, and then to say, see what we're doing and how well it is working? Well, extrapolate from there, and that's where we're going. The good to great companies tended not to publicly proclaim big goals at the outset. Rather, they began to spin the flywheel, understanding to action, step after step, turn after turn. After the flywheel built up momentum, they'd look up and say, hey, if we just keep pushing on this thing, there's no reason we can't accomplish X. When you let the flywheel do the talking, you don't need to fervently communicate your goals. People can just extrapolate from the momentum of the flywheel for themselves. Hey, if we just keep doing this, look at where we can go. As people decide among themselves to turn the fact of potential into the fact of results, the goal almost sets itself. Stop and think about it for a minute. What do the right people want more than almost anything else? They want to be part of a winning team. They want to contribute to producing visible, tangible results. They want to feel the excitement of being involved in something that just flat out works. When the right people see a simple plan born of confronting the brutal facts, a plan developed from understanding, not bravado, they are likely to say, that'll work, count me in. when they see the monolithic unity of the executive team behind the simple plan and the selfless, dedicated qualities of Level 5 leadership, they'll drop their cynicism. When people begin to feel the magic of momentum, when they begin to see tangible results, when they can feel the flywheel beginning to build speed, turn, faster, 2 to 4 to 8 to 16 to 32 to 64 to 128 to 100,000 and a million, that's when the bulk of people line up and throw their shoulders against the wheel and push. We found a very different pattern in the comparison companies, which by now shouldn't surprise you. Instead of a quiet, deliberate process of figuring out what needed to be done and then simply doing it, the comparison companies frequently launched new programs, often with great fanfare and hoopla aimed at motivating the troops, only to see the programs fail to produce sustained results. They sought the single defining action, the grand program, the one killer innovation, the miracle moment that would allow them to skip the arduous build-up stage and jump right to breakthrough. They would push the flywheel in one direction, then stop, change course, and throw it in a new direction. And then they would stop, change course, and throw it yet again in another direction. After years of lurching back and forth, the comparison companies failed to build sustained momentum and fell instead into what we came to call the doom loop. Just look at what happened to Warner Lambert, the direct comparison company to Gillette. In 1979, Warner Lambert told Businessweek that it aimed to be a leading consumer products company. Just 1 year later, in 1980, it did an abrupt about-face and turned its sights on healthcare, saying, "Our flat-out aim is to go after Merck, Lilly, SmithKline, everybody and his brother." In 1981, yet only a year later, after the shift to healthcare, the company reversed course yet again and returned to diversification and consumer goods. 6 years later, in 1987, Warner Lambert did another U-turn away from consumer goods to try once again to be like Merck. At the same time, the company spent 3 times as much on consumer advertising as on R&D, a somewhat puzzling strategy for a company trying to beat Merck. Then, in the early 1990s, reacting to Clinton-era healthcare reform, the company threw itself into reverse yet again and re-embraced diversification and consumer brands. Back and forth, lurch and thrash, to and fro. Each new Warner Lambert CEO brought his own new program and halted the momentum of his predecessor. Ward Hagen tried to create a breakthrough with an expensive acquisition in the hospital supply business in 1982. 3 years later, his successor, Joe Williams, extracted Warner Lambert from the hospital supply business and took a $550 million write-off. He tried to focus the company on beating Merck, but then his successor threw the company back to diversification in consumer goods. And so it went, back and forth, with each CEO trying to make a mark with his own program. From 1979 to 98, Warner Lambert went through 3 major restructurings, one per CEO, hacking away 20,000 people in search of quick breakthrough results. Time and again, the company would attain a burst of results, then slacken, never attaining the sustained momentum of a build-up breakthrough flywheel. Stock returns flattened relative to the market, and Warner Lambert disappeared as an independent company, swallowed up by Pfizer. The Warner Lambert case is extreme, but we found some version of the doom loop in every comparison company. While the specific permutations of the doom loop varied from company to company, there are some highly prevalent patterns, 2 of which deserve particular note: the misguided use of acquisitions and the selection of leaders who undo the work of previous generations. First, acquisitions. Peter Drucker once observed that the drive for mergers and acquisitions comes less from sound reasoning and more from the fact that doing deals is a much more exciting way to spend your day than doing work. Indeed, the comparison companies would have well understood the popular bumper sticker from the 1980s, "When the going gets tough, we go shopping." To understand the role of acquisitions in the process of going from good to great, we undertook a systematic qualitative and quantitative analysis of all acquisitions and divestitures in all the companies in our study, from 10 years before the transition date through 1998. While we noticed no particular pattern in the amount or scale of acquisitions, we did note a significant difference in the success rate of acquisitions in the good to great companies versus the comparisons. Why did the good to great companies have a substantially higher success rate with acquisitions, especially major acquisitions? The key to their success is that their big acquisitions took place after development of the hedgehog concept and after the flywheel had built significant momentum. They used acquisitions as an accelerator of flywheel momentum, not a creator of it. Not surprisingly, the comparison companies frequently tried to jump right to breakthrough via an acquisition or merger, and it never worked. Often with their core business under siege, the comparison companies would dive into a big acquisition as a way to increase growth, diversify away their troubles, or make a CEO look good. Yet they never addressed the fundamental question: what can we do better than any other company in the world that fits our economic denominator and that we have passion for? They never learned the simple truth that while you can buy your way to growth, you absolutely cannot buy your way to greatness. Two big mediocrities joined together never make one great company. The second key doom loop pattern is that of new leaders who step in, stop an already spinning flywheel, and throw it in an entirely new direction. Consider Harris Corporation, an unsustained comparison, which applied many of the good to great concepts in the early 1960s and began a classic build-up process that in fact did lead to breakthrough results. It looked like a promising candidate for a good to great transformation hitting breakthrough in 1975. Sadly, then the flywheel came to a grinding halt. In 1978, Joseph Boyd became chief executive. Boyd had previously been with Radiation Inc., a corporation acquired by Harris years earlier. His first key decision as CEO was to move the company headquarters from Cleveland to Melbourne, Florida, which just happened to be Radiation's hometown and the location of Boyd's house and his 47-foot powerboat, the Lazy Rascal. In 1983, Boyd threw a giant wrench into the flywheel by divesting the printing business. At the time, Harris was the #1 producer of printing equipment in the world. The printing business was one of the most profitable parts of the company, generating nearly a third of total operating profits. And what did Boyd do with the proceeds? He threw the company headlong into the office automation business. But could Harris become the best in the world at office automation? Not likely. Horrendous software development problems delayed introduction of Harris's first workstation as the company stumbled into the battlefield to confront IBM, DEC, and Wang. Then, in an attempt to jump right to a new breakthrough, Harris spent a third of its entire corporate net worth to buy Linear Business Products, a company in the low-end word processing business. Computer World magazine wrote, Boyd targeted the automated office as a key. Unfortunately for Harris, the company had everything but an office product. The attempt to design and market a word processing system met with a dismal failure, out of tune with the market, and it had to be scrapped. The flywheel, which had been spinning with great momentum after previous CEOs Divley and Tullis, came detached from the axle, wobbled into the air, and then crashed to a grinding halt. From the end of 1973 to the end of 1978, Harris beat the market by more than 5 times. But from the end of 1978 to the end of 1983, Harris fell 39% behind the market, and by 1988, it had fallen over 70% behind. The doom loop replaced the flywheel. In a sense, the flywheel is a wraparound idea of the entire good to great study. When I look over the good to great transformations, the one word that keeps coming to mind is consistency. Another word offered to me by physics professor R.J. Peterson is coherence. What is 1 plus 1? He asked, then pausing for effect. 4. In physics, we have been talking about the idea of coherence, the magnifying effect of one factor upon another. In reading about the flywheel, I couldn't help but think of the principle of coherence. However you phrase it, the basic idea is the same. Each piece of the system reinforces the other parts of the system to form an integrated whole that is much more powerful than the sum of the parts. It is only through consistency over time, through multiple generations, that you get maximum results. In a sense, everything in Good to Great is an exploration and description of the pieces of the built-up to breakthrough flywheel pattern. In standing back to survey the overall framework, we see that every factor works together to create this pattern, and each component produces a push on the flywheel. If you diligently and successfully apply each concept in the framework, and you continue to push in a consistent direction on the flywheel, accumulating momentum step by step and turn by turn, you will eventually reach breakthrough. It might not happen today, or tomorrow, or next week. It might not even happen next year. But it will happen. And when it does, you will face an entirely new set of challenges. How to accelerate momentum in response to ever-rising expectations, and how to ensure that the flywheel continues to turn long into the future. In short, your challenge will no longer be how to go from good to great, but how to go from great to enduring great, from good to great to built to last. Chapter 9. From Good to Great to Built to Last. When we began the Good to Great research project, we confronted a dilemma. How should we think about the ideas in Built to Last while doing the Good to Great research? Briefly, Built to Last was based on a 6-year research project conducted at Stanford Business School in the early 1990s. It answered the question, what does it take to start and build an enduring great company from the ground up? My research mentor and co-author on that book, Jerry I. Porras, and I studied 18 enduring great companies, institutions that stood the test of time, tracing their founding in some cases back to the 1800s, while becoming the iconic great companies of the late 20th century. Similar to this work, we used direct comparison companies for 18 paired comparisons. In short, we sought to identify the essential distinctions between great companies and good companies as they endure over decades, perhaps even centuries. When I had the first summer research team assembled for the Good to Great project, I asked, what should be the role of Built to Last in doing this study? I don't think it should play any role, said Brian Bagley. I didn't join this research team to do a derivative piece of work. Neither did I, added Allison Sinclair. I'm excited about a new project and a new question. It wouldn't be very fulfilling to just fill in the pieces of your other book. But wait a minute, I pushed back. We spent 6 years on the previous study. It might be helpful to build on our previous work. But then Paul Weissman jumped in. I seem to recall that you got the idea for this study when a McKinsey partner said that Built to Last didn't answer the question of how to change a good company into a great one. What if the answers are different? I'm sure it will be no surprise to you that we debated for many weeks, back and forth, to and fro. But then Stephanie Judd weighed in with an argument that swayed me. I love the ideas in Built to Last, and that's what worries me, she said. I'm afraid that if we start with BTL, which is our shorthand for Built to Last, as the frame of reference, we'll just go around in circles, proving our own biases. It became clear that there would be substantially less risk in starting from scratch, setting out to discover what we would, whether it matched BTL or not. Early in the research then, we made a very important decision. We decided to conduct the research for Good to Great as if Built to Last didn't exist. This was the only way to clearly see the factors in transforming a good company into a great one, with minimal bias from our previous work. We could then return later and ask, how, if at all, do the two studies relate? Now, 5 years later, with the project complete, we can stand back and look at the two works in the context of each other. And looking across the two studies, I offer the following 4 conclusions. 1. When I consider the enduring great companies from Built to Last, I now see substantial evidence that their early leaders followed the Good to Great framework. The only real difference is that they did so as entrepreneurs in small or early stage companies trying to get off the ground. rather than as CEOs trying to transform established companies from good to great. 2. In an ironic twist, I now see Good to Great not as a sequel to Built to Last, but as a prequel. What you do is you apply the findings in Good to Great to create sustained great results, as either a startup or as an established organization. And then you apply the findings in Built to Last to go from great results to an enduring great company. 3. To make the shift from sustained great results to an enduring great company of iconic stature, you need to apply the central concept from Built to Last. Discover your core values and purpose beyond just making money, or what we came to call a core ideology, and combine this with the dynamic of preserve the core, stimulate progress. And 4, a tremendous resonance exists between the two studies. The ideas from each enrich and inform the ideas of the other. In particular, Good to Great answers a fundamental question, raised but not answered in Built to Last. What is the difference between a good BHAG and a bad BHAG? BHAG stands for Big, Hairy, Audacious Goal. When I look back at the Built to Last study, it appears that the enduring great companies did in fact go through a process of build-up to breakthrough, following the Good to Great framework during their formative years. Take, for example, the evolution of Walmart. Most people think that Sam Walton just exploded onto the scene with his visionary idea for rural discount retailing, hitting breakthrough almost as a startup company. But nothing could be further from the truth. Sam Walton began in 1945 with a single dime store. He didn't open his second store until 7 years later. He built incrementally, step by step, turn by turn of the flywheel, until the hedgehog concept of large discount marts popped out as a natural evolutionary step in the mid-1960s. It took Sam Walton a quarter of a century to grow from that single dime store to a chain of 38 Walmarts. But then, bang, breakthrough, flywheel turning, huge momentum. From 1970 to 2000, Walmart hit breakthrough and exploded to over 3,000 stores, with over 150 billion, yes, billion with a B, dollars in annual revenues. Just like the story of the chicken jumping out of the egg that we discussed in the flywheel chapter, Walmart had been incubating for decades before the egg cracked open. As Sam Walton himself wrote, somehow over the years people have gotten the impression that Walmart was just this great idea that turned into an overnight success. But it was an outgrowth of everything we'd been doing since 1945. And like most overnight successes, it was about 20 years in the making. If there ever was a classic case of build-up leading to a hedgehog concept, followed by breakthrough momentum in the flywheel, Walmart is clearly it. The only difference between Sam Walton and the Good to Great CEOs is that Sam Walton followed the model as an entrepreneur, building a great company from the ground up, rather than as a CEO, transforming an established company from good to great. But it's the same basic idea: build up, breakthrough, flywheel. Another company from the Built to Last study, Hewlett-Packard, provides an excellent example of the good to great ideas at work in their formative stages. For instance, Bill Hewlett and David Packard's entire founding concept for HP was not what, but who. Back to the principle of first who, then what. They started with each other. They'd been best friends in graduate school and simply wanted to build a company together that would attract other people with similar values and standards. The founding minutes of their first meeting on August 23, 1937, begin by stating that they would design, manufacture, and sell products in the electrical engineering fields very broadly defined. But in one of the most wonderful corporate documents I've ever looked at, those same founding minutes go on to say, the question of what to manufacture was postponed. One wonders how they would have done raising venture capital. Hewlett and Packard stumbled around for months trying to come up with something, anything, that would get the company out of the garage. They considered yacht transmitters, air conditioning control devices, medical devices, phonograph amplifiers, you name it. They built electronic bowling alley sensors, a clock drive for a telescope, an electronic shock jiggle machine to help overweight people lose weight. It didn't really matter what the company made in the very early days, as long as it made a technical contribution, and would enable Hewlett and Packard to build a company together and with other like-minded people. It was the ultimate first who, then what startup. Hewlett and Packard were themselves consummate Level 5 leaders, first as entrepreneurs and later as company builders. Years after HP had established itself as one of the most important technology companies in the world, Hewlett maintained a remarkable personal humility. In 1972, HP Vice President Barney Oliver described Hewlett's humility. At an executive council meeting, Hewlett remarked, "Look, we've grown because the industry grew," writes Barney Oliver in his own reminiscences. "We were lucky enough to be sitting on the nose when the rocket took off. We don't deserve a damn bit of credit." Oliver continues, after a moment's silence, while everyone digested this humbling comment, Packard said, "Well, Bill, at least we didn't louse it up completely." And speaking of David Packard, I had the opportunity to meet him shortly before his death. Despite being one of Silicon Valley's first self-made billionaires, he lived in the same small house that he and his wife built for themselves in 1957, overlooking a simple orchard. The tiny kitchen, with its dated linoleum and the simply furnished living room, bespoke a man who needed no material symbols to proclaim, "I'm a billionaire, I'm important, I'm successful." His idea of a good time, said Bill Terry, who worked with Packard for 36 years, was to get some of his friends together to string some barbed wire. Packard bequeathed his $5.6 billion estate to a charitable foundation, and upon his death, his family created a eulogy pamphlet with a photo of him sitting on a tractor in farming clothes. The caption made no reference to his stature as one of the great industrialists of the 20th century. It simply read, "David Packard, 1912 to 1996, rancher, etc. Level 5, indeed." But of course, Built to Last is not just good to great in different clothes. There are some key ideas that came from Built to Last. In particular, we learned in Built to Last that there is a vital extra dimension that elevates an enterprise to the elite status of an enduring great company. That extra dimension is a guiding philosophy, or what we came to call a core ideology, which consists of core values and a core purpose, a reason for being beyond just making money. These resemble the principles in the Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident. They are never perfectly followed, but always present as an inspiring standard and an answer to the question of why it is important that we exist. Enduring great companies don't exist merely to deliver returns to shareholders. Indeed, in a truly great company, profits and cash flow become like blood and water to a healthy body. They are absolutely essential for life, but they are not the very point of life. For example, Merck has consistently outperformed the market as a highly profitable company, growing to nearly $6 billion in profits and beating the market by over 10 times from 1946 to 2000. Yet despite its remarkable financial performance, Merck does not view its ultimate reason for being as making money. In 1950, George Merck II, son of the founder, set forth the company's philosophy. "We try to remember that medicine is for the patient," he said. "It is not for the profits. The profits follow, and if we have remembered that, they have never failed to appear. The better we have remembered it, the larger they have been." An important caveat to the concept of core values is that there are no specific right core values for becoming an enduring great company. No matter what core value you propose, I can show you an enduring great company that does not have that specific core value. A company need not have passion for its customers. Sony didn't. It was somewhere between indifference and disdain for its customers. Or respect for the individual. Disney didn't. It tends to systematically pulverize individuality out of everybody that works there. Or quality, which Walmart didn't. Or social responsibility, which Ford didn't. It doesn't need to have any one of these specific core values to become great. This was one of the most paradoxical findings from Built to Last. On the one hand, core values are absolutely essential for enduring greatness. But, on the other hand, it doesn't seem to matter what those core values are. Some companies are passionate about their customers, as IBM is, but others, like Sony, are not. And Sony is passionate about innovation, but Ford is not. The point is not what core values you have, but that you have core values at all. That you know what they are, that you build them explicitly into the organization, and that you preserve them over time. This notion of preserving your core ideology is a central feature of enduring great companies. The obvious question is, how do you preserve the core and yet adapt to a changing world? The answer? You have to embrace the key concept of preserve the core, stimulate progress. Enduring great companies preserve their core values and purpose, yet their business strategies and their operating practices endlessly adapt to a changing world. This is the magical combination. Let me illustrate with the story of Walt Disney. In 1923, an energetic 21-year-old animator moved from Kansas City to Los Angeles and tried to get a job in the movie business. No film company would hire him, so he used his meager savings to rent a camera, set up a studio in his uncle's garage, and began making animated cartoons. This, of course, was Walt himself. In 1934, Mr. Disney took the bold step, never before taken, to create successful, full-length animated feature films, including such classics as Snow White, Pinocchio, Fantasia, and Bambi. In the 1950s, Disney moved into television with the Mickey Mouse Club. Also in the 1950s, Walt Disney paid a fateful visit to a number of amusement parks and came away disgusted, calling them dirty, phony places run by tough-looking people. He decided that Disney could build something much better, perhaps even the best in the world, and the company launched a whole new business in theme parks, first with Disneyland and later with Walt Disney World and Epcot Center. Over time, Disney theme parks have become a cornerstone experience for families from all over the world. Throughout all these dramatic changes, from cartoons to full-length feature animation, from the Mickey Mouse Club to Disney World, the company held firmly to a consistent set of core values that included a passionate belief in creative imagination, a fanatic attention to detail, abhorrence of cynicism, and preservation of the Disney magic. Mr. Disney also instilled a remarkable constancy of purpose that permeated every new Disney venture, namely, to bring happiness to millions, especially children. This purpose cut across national borders and has endured through time. And if you interact with Disney today, you will still find those same core values and that same core purpose in evidence. Walt Disney provides a classic case of preserve the core and stimulate progress, holding a core ideology fixed while changing strategies and practices over time. And its adherence to this principle is the fundamental reason why it has endured as a great company. Now, looking at Good to Great and Built to Last relative to each other, I see tight conceptual links between the two studies. I like to think of it this way. Good to Great provides the core ideas for getting a flywheel turning from build-up through breakthrough. Built to Last comes as the next stage, and it gives you the key ideas for keeping a flywheel accelerating long into the future, and most important, for elevating a company to iconic stature, to become a GE, or an HP, or a Disney, or a 3M, or a Coke. I'm not going to belabor all the links here on this recording, but I'd like to highlight one particularly powerful link, the connection between BHAGs and the three circles of the hedgehog concept. BHAGs come from Built to Last, and we identified BHAGs as a key way to stimulate progress while preserving the core. Again, a BHAG is BHAG, and it's short for Big, Hairy, Audacious Goal. A BHAG is a huge and daunting goal, like a big mountain to climb. It is clear, compelling, and people get it right away. A BHAG serves as a unifying focal point of effort, galvanizing people and creating team spirit as people strive toward a finish line. Like the 1960s moon mission, a BHAG captures the imagination and grabs people in the gut. I have to admit, I like BHAGs. But as exciting as they are, we left a vital question unanswered in Built to Last. Namely, what is the difference between a bad BHAG and a good BHAG? Not all BHAGs are good. Swimming from Australia to New Zealand would be a BHAG for me, but it would also kill me. We can now offer an answer to the question of the difference between good BHAGs and bad BHAGs. Bad BHAGs are set with bravado. Good BHAGs are set with understanding. Indeed, when you combine the quiet understanding of the three circles of the hedgehog concept from the Good to Great study with the audacity of a BHAG from the Built to Last study, you get a powerful, I would say an almost magical mix. Let me give you one of my favorite stories. It comes from Boeing in the 1950s and beyond. Until the early 1950s, Boeing built huge flying machines for the military. The B-17 Flying Fortress, the B-29 Super Fortress, and the B-52 jet bomber Stratofortress. However, Boeing had virtually no presence in the commercial aircraft market, and the airlines showed no interest in buying aircraft from Boeing. "You make great bombers up there in Seattle. Why don't you just stick with that?" they said in response to Boeing's inquiries about the prospect of doing a commercial airliner. Today, 50 years later, we take for granted that most air travel takes place on Boeing jets. But in 1952, almost no one outside the military flew on Boeing. Wisely, through the 1940s, Boeing had stayed away from the commercial sphere, an arena in which McDonnell Douglas had vastly superior abilities in smaller, propeller-driven planes, and that's what comprised the commercial fleet. But something changed. In the early 1950s, Boeing saw an opportunity to leapfrog McDonnell Douglas by putting together its experience with big, hairy, audacious aircraft to its understanding of jet engines. Led by a Level 5 leader named Bill Allen, Boeing executives debated the wisdom of moving into the commercial sphere. They came to understand that whereas Boeing could not have been the best commercial plane maker a decade earlier, the cumulative experience in jets, combined with those big, hairy, audacious airplanes, now made such a dream possible. They also came to see that the economics of commercial planes would be vastly superior to the military market. And, of no small importance, the Boeing people were just flat out turned on by the whole idea of building a commercial jet. So in 1952, Bill Allen, who comes right from the Darwin Smith School of Management, and his team made the decision to spend a quarter of the company's entire net worth to build a prototype jet that could be used for commercial aviation. They built this jet, they called it the 707, and launched Boeing on a bid to become the leading commercial aviation company in the world. 3 decades later, after producing 5 of the most successful commercial jets in history, the 707, the 27, the 37, the 47, and the 57, Boeing stood as the absolute, unquestioned greatest company in the commercial airplane industry worldwide. Not until the late 1990s would Boeing's #1 position be seriously challenged, and it would take a government consortium in the form of Airbus to do it. Here's the key point from the Boeing story. Boeing's BHAG, while huge and daunting, was not any random huge and daunting goal. It was a goal that made sense within the context of the 3 circles. Boeing's executives understood, 1, that the company could become the best in the world at a commercial jet, even though it had no presence in the market. 2, the shift would eventually improve Boeing's economics by increasing profit per aircraft model. And 3, the Boeing people were very passionate about the idea. Boeing acted with understanding, not bravado, at this pivotal moment in its history. And that is one of the key reasons why it has endured as a great company. The Boeing case underscores a very key point. To remain great over time requires, on the one hand, staying squarely within your 3 circles, while on the other hand, being willing to change the specific manifestation of what is inside your 3 circles at any given moment. Boeing in 1952 never left the 3 circles, nor did it abandon its core ideology, but it did create an exciting new BHAG and adjusted its hedgehog concept to include commercial aircraft. A new BHAG, but within the context of the 3 circles. So as you think about this idea, I want you to think of the 3 intersecting circles of the hedgehog concept. What we can be the best in the world at, what drives our economics, and what we can be passionate about, and that coming up with a BHAG requires putting a goal right smack in the middle of those three circles. The three-circle BHAG framework provides one powerful example of how the ideas from the two studies link together, and I'd like to offer it as a practical tool for creating this link within your own situation. Yet that alone will not make your company great and lasting. To create an enduring great company requires all the key concepts from both studies, tied together and applied consistently over time. Furthermore, and please take note of this, if you ever stop doing any one of the key ideas, you will inevitably slide back towards mediocrity. Remember, it is much easier to become great than to remain great. Ultimately, the consistent application of both studies, Good to Great and Built to Last, one building upon the other, gives the best chance for creating greatness that lasts. We're almost to the end of our time together, and until this point, I've only dealt with the question of how to create great results and enduring great companies. But I've not addressed the question of why greatness. And in our closing minutes, I'd like to offer a few thoughts on this question. During a break at a seminar that I gave to a group of my ex-students from Stanford, one came up to me and said, "Maybe I'm just not ambitious, or maybe ambitious enough, but I really don't want to build a huge company. Is there anything wrong with that?" "Not at all," I replied. "Greatness doesn't depend on size." I then told him about Sina Cementob, who runs the building where I have my research laboratory. Sina has created a truly great institution. It's an old 1892 red brick school building that has been renovated into the most extraordinary space, decorated and maintained with tremendous attention to detail, in fact, bordering on perfection. By one definition of results, attracting the most interesting people in Boulder, setting a standard that other local buildings measure themselves against, and generating the highest profit per foot of space, his small enterprise is a truly great institution in my hometown. Cementob has never defined greatness by size, and there is no reason for him to. So my student paused for a moment, then said, "Okay, I accept that I don't need to build a big company in order to have a great company. But even so, why should I try to build a great company? What if I just want to be successful?" Now that question brought me up short. This was not a lazy person asking me. He had started his own business as a young man, put himself through law school, and after his graduate school became a driven entrepreneur. He has remarkable energy, an intense and infectious enthusiasm. Of all the students I've known over the years, he is one that I have little doubt will be enormously successful. And yet he questions the whole idea of trying to build something great and lasting. To him, and to everyone else, I can offer two answers. First, I believe that it is no harder to build something great than to build something good. Let me say that again. I believe that it is no harder to build something great than to build something good. It might be statistically more rare to reach greatness, but it does not require more suffering than perpetuating mediocrity. Indeed, if some of the comparison companies in our study are any indication, it involves less suffering, and perhaps even less work. The beauty and power of the research findings is that they can radically simplify our lives while increasing our effectiveness. There is great solace in the simple fact of clarity about what is vital and what is not. The point of this tape is not that you should go out and add these findings to what you are already doing and make yourself even more overworked. No, the point is to realize that much of what we're doing is at best a waste of energy. If we organized the majority of our work time around applying these principles and pretty much ignored or stopped doing everything else, our lives would be simpler and our results vastly improved. Let me illustrate this point with a non-business example. The coaching staff of a high school cross-country running team got together for dinner after winning its second state championship in 2 years. The program had been transformed in the previous 5 years from good to great. "I just don't get it," said one of the coaches. "Why are we so successful? We don't work any harder than other teams, and what we do is just so simple. Why does it work?" He was referring to the hedgehog concept of the program, captured in the simple statement, "We run best at the end." We run best at the end of workouts. We run best at the end of races. And we run best at the end of the season when it counts the most. Everything is geared to this simple idea, and the coaching staff knows how to create this effect better than any other team in the state. For example, they place a coach at the 2-mile mark of a 3.1-mile race to collect data as the runners go past. But unlike most teams, which collect time splits, minutes per mile running pace, this team collects place splits, what places the runners are in as they go by. Then they calculate not how fast the runners go, but how many competitors they pass at the end of the race, from mile 2 to the finish. The kids learn how to pace themselves and race with confidence. We run best at the end, they think at the end of a hard race, so if I'm hurting really bad, then my competitors must hurt a whole lot worse. Now, of equal importance is what they don't waste energy on. For example, when the head coach took over the program, she found herself burdened with expectations to do fun programs and rah-rah stuff to motivate the kids, to keep them interested. Parties and special trips and shopping adventures to Nike outlets and inspirational speeches and all the other stuff. She quickly put an end to nearly all that distracting and time-consuming junk. Look, she said, this program will be built on the idea that running is fun, racing is fun, improving is fun, and winning is fun. If you're not passionate about what we do here, if you don't like the idea of running, winning, and racing, well then go find something else to do. The result? The number of kids in the program nearly tripled in 5 years, from 30 to 82. Before the boys' team won the first ever state cross-country championship in the school's history, she didn't explicitly set the goal or try to motivate the kids toward it. Instead, she let the kids gain momentum, flywheel effect, seeing for themselves, race by race, week by week, that they could beat anyone in the state. Then one day out on a training run, one boy said to his teammates, "Hey, I think we could win state." "Yeah, I think so too," said another. And everyone just kept running. The goal was quietly understood. The coaching staff never once mentioned the state championship idea until the kids saw for themselves that they could do it. This created the strongest culture of discipline possible, as the 7 varsity runners felt personally responsible for winning state. A commitment made not to the coaches, but to each other. One team member even called all his teammates the night before the state race, just to make sure they were all getting ready for bed early. No need for the coaches to be disciplinarians on this team. Hammering through the last mile, passing competitors. We run best at the end. If they hurt, I hurt less. If I hurt, they hurt more. Each kid hurt, but he knew it would hurt a lot more if he had to look his teammates in the eyes as the only one who failed to come through. No one failed, and the team beat every other team at the state meet by a large margin. The head coach began rebuilding the whole program around the idea of first two. One of the assistant coaches is a 300-pound ex-shot putter, hardly the image of your lean distance runner, but he is without question the right who. He shares the values and has the traits needed to help build a great team. And as the program built momentum, as they put championship banner upon championship banner in the gym, it attracted more kids and more great coaches. People want to be part of this spinning flywheel. They want to be part of a championship team. They want to be part of a first-class culture. When the cross-country team posts yet another banner in the gym, more kids sign up. The gene pool deepens. The team gets faster, which produces more championships, which attracts more kids, which creates even faster teams, and so forth and so on, turn by turn by turn in the infectious flywheel effect. Now let me ask you a question. Are these coaches suffering more than other teams? Are they working harder in order to create a great program? No. In fact, all the assistant coaches have full-time professional jobs outside of coaching. Engineers, computer technicians, teachers, and they work for essentially no pay, carving precious time out of their busy lives to be part of building a great program. They're just focused on the right things and not the wrong things. They're doing virtually everything we've discussed within their specific situation and not wasting time on anything that doesn't fit. Simple, clean, straightforward, elegant, and I would add, a heck of a lot of fun. The point of this story is twofold. First, you can apply these ideas at any span of responsibility, even if you're just the cross-country coach. Second, when you apply them in any situation, they make your life and your experience better while improving results. And along the way, you just might make what you're building great. So I ask again, if it's no harder, given these ideas, the results better, and the process just so much more fun, well, why wouldn't you go for greatness? Now, to be clear, I'm not suggesting that going from good to great is easy, or that every organization will successfully make the leap. By definition, it is not possible for everyone to be above average. But I am asserting that those who strive to turn good into great find the process no more painful or exhausting than those who settle for just letting things wallow along in mind-numbing mediocrity. Yes, it's true, turning good into great takes energy. But the building of momentum adds more energy back into the pool than it takes out. And this is the secret alchemy of it all. Conversely, perpetuating mediocrity is an inherently depressing process and drains much more energy out of the pool than it puts back in. Now, I mentioned that there were two answers to the question of why greatness. The first, it's not any harder, so you might as well go for it. But there's a second answer, one that is at the very heart of what motivated us to undertake this huge project in the first place, the search for meaning, or more precisely, the search for meaningful work. I asked that head coach of the cross-country program why she felt compelled to make it great. She paused. That's a really good question. Long pause. It's really hard to answer. More pause. I guess, pause. It's because, pause. I guess I just really care about what we're doing. I believe in running and the impact it can make on these kids' lives. I want them to have a great experience and to have the experience of being part of something absolutely first class. And now for the interesting twist. The coach has an MBA from an elite business school and is a Phi Beta Kappa graduate in economics, having won the prize for the best undergraduate honors thesis at one of the most selective universities in the world. But she found that most of what her classmates went on to do, investment banking on Wall Street, starting internet companies, management consulting, working for IBM, or whatever, held no meaning for her. She just didn't care enough about them to want to make them great. For her, those jobs held no meaningful purpose, not for her. And so she made the decision to search for meaningful work about which she would have such passion that the question of why try for greatness would seem almost tautological or nonsensical. If you're doing something you care that much about, and you believe in its purpose deeply enough, then it is impossible to imagine not trying to make it great. It's just a given. I've tried to imagine the level 5 leaders of the companies we've studied answering the question of why greatness. Of course, the interesting thing is, most would say, we're not great, we could be so much better. But if pushed to answer, I believe they would respond much like the cross-country coach. They're doing something they really care about, and about which they have great passion. Like Bill Hewlett, they might care first and foremost about creating a company that by virtue of its values and success has a tremendous impact on the way companies are managed around the world, as happened with the HP way. Or like Ken Iverson at Nucor, they might feel a crusader's purpose to obliterate the oppressive class hierarchies that cause degradation of both labor and management. Or like Darlin Smith at Kimberly-Clark, they might derive a tremendous sense of purpose from their inner quest for excellence itself, being driven from within to make anything they touch the best it can be. Or perhaps like Lyle Everingham at Kroger, or Cork Walgreen at Walgreens, they might have grown up in the business and just really love it. You don't need to have some grand existential reason for why you love what you're doing or why you care deeply about your work, although you might. All that matters is that you do love it and that you do care. So the question of why greatness is almost a nonsense question. If you're engaged in work that you love and care about, for whatever reason, then the question needs no answer. The question is not why, but how. Indeed, the real question is not why greatness. Rather, the question is, what work makes you feel compelled to try to create greatness? If you have to ask the question, why should we try to make it great? Isn't success enough? then I submit that you're engaged in the wrong line of work. Perhaps your quest to be part of building something great will not fall in your business life, but find it somewhere. If it's not in corporate life, then perhaps in making your church great. If not there, then perhaps a nonprofit, or a community organization, or a class you teach. Get involved in something that you care so much about that you want to make it the greatest it can possibly be, not because of what you will get, but just because it can be done. When you do this, you will start to grow inevitably toward becoming a level 5 leader. In Chapter 2, we wondered about how to become level 5, and I suggested that you start by practicing the rest of the findings. But under what conditions will you have the drive and discipline to fully practice the other findings? Perhaps it is when you care deeply enough about the work in which you are engaged, and when your responsibilities line up with your own personal 3 circles. When all these pieces come together, not only does your work move toward greatness, but so does your life. For in the end, it is impossible to have a great life unless it is a meaningful life. And it is very difficult to have a meaningful life without meaningful work. Perhaps then you might gain that rare tranquility that comes from knowing that you've had a hand in creating something of intrinsic excellence that makes a contribution. Indeed, you might even gain that deepest of all satisfactions, knowing that your short time here on this earth has been well spent and that it mattered. Before we close, allow me to briefly summarize the key ideas in Good to Great to help ingrain them in your memory. Think of transformation as a process of build-up followed by breakthrough, broken into 3 broad stages: disciplined people, disciplined thought, and disciplined action. Within each of these 3 stages, there are 2 key components. In the first stage, disciplined people, we have level 5 leadership, those humble heroes who have the will to do whatever it takes to create something great. We also have the concept of first who, then what. Get the right people on the bus, the wrong people off the bus, and the right people in the right seats. In the second stage, disciplined thought, we have the need to confront the brutal facts, yet never lose faith in the ability to prevail, otherwise known as the Stockdale paradox. Also in disciplined thought, we have the crucial hedgehog concept, gained by deep understanding of 3 intersecting circles. And by now, you probably know them by heart. What you can be the best in the world at, what economic denominator best drives your economic engine, and what you are deeply passionate about. In the third stage, disciplined action, we have the culture of discipline. Remember to rinse your cottage cheese and to begin your stop doing list. Also remember the discipline to stay focused on the intersection of the 3 circles of your hedgehog concept. We also have the role of technology accelerators, which can help transform good to great and to help it gain its second wind. Finally, wrapping around all these ideas is the concept of the flywheel, accumulating momentum turn upon turn, which captures the gestalt of the entire process of going from good to great. Then once you've gone from good to great, the next step is to make the leap from great to enduring great by applying the key ideas from Built to Last, principally the idea of preserve your core ideology while stimulating change and progress, and setting BHAGs that fall in the middle of your 3 circles. These few principles should help you on your journey from good to great, and I extend to you my very best wishes for your success. Epilogue. Frequently asked questions. Question: did you originally identify more than 11 good to great possibilities? And if so, what good to great examples did not make it into the study? The 11 good to great companies were the only examples from our initial universe of Fortune 500 companies that met all the criteria for entrance into the study. They do not represent a sample. The fact that we studied the total set of companies that met our criteria should increase our confidence in the findings. We do not need to worry that a second set of companies in the Fortune 500 went from good to great, not by our criteria anyway, by other methods. Question: why did only 11 companies make the cut? I get asked this question a lot because people worry that, gosh, if there's only 11 of 1435, is there any hope? And the answer is yes, there's a lot of hope. The principal reason that we only got 11 of 1435 is that we used very tough standards, 3 times the market over 15 years. There are other reasons, though. Second, that 15-year sustainability requirement is very difficult to meet. Many companies show a sharp rise for 5 or 10 years with a hit product or a charismatic leader, but few manage to achieve 15 years. A third reason why there are only 11 is that we were looking for a very specific pattern: sustained great results preceded by a sustained period of average results or worse. It turns out that great companies are relatively easy to find, but good to great companies are much more rare. Now, when you add all these factors together, it's not surprising that we identified only 11 examples. I'd like to stress that, in my opinion, the only 11 finding should not be discouraging. We had to set a cutoff somewhere, and we chose a very tough one. If we'd set a slightly lower hurdle, say 2.5 times the market, or only 10 years of sustainability, then many more companies would have qualified. Most important, after we finished all the research, I'm convinced that many organizations can make the journey from good to great if they apply the lessons that we learned. The problem is not the statistical odds. The real problem is that people are squandering their time and resources on the wrong things. Question: what about statistical significance, given that only 11 companies made the final cut, and the total study size is only 28 companies when you count the comparisons? This is a question that bothered us on the research team. We wondered about the statistical significance of our findings. So we went to 2 leading professors, one a statistician and the other an applied mathematician. We put these professors on the question. The statistician, Jeffrey T. Luftig at the University of Colorado, looked at our dilemma and concluded that we do not have a statistics problem. He pointed out that the concept of statistical significance applies only when the sampling of data is involved. Look, you didn't sample companies, he told us. You did a very purposeful selection and found the only 11 companies from the Fortune 500 that met your criteria. When you put these 11 companies against the 17 comparison companies, the probabilities that the concepts in your framework appear by random chance are essentially 0. We asked applied mathematics professor William P. Briggs to examine our research method, and he framed the question this way: what is the probability of finding by chance a group of 11 companies, all of whom show the primary traits we discovered, while the direct comparison companies did not show these traits? He concluded that the probability is less than 1 in 17 million. What these professors taught us is that there is virtually no chance that we simply found 11 random events that just happened to show the good to great pattern we were looking for. We can conclude with confidence that the traits we found are strongly associated with transformations from good to great. Question: why didn't any high technology companies appear in the study set? Most technology companies were eliminated because they are not old enough to show the good to great pattern. We required at least 30 years of history to consider a company for the study. Remember, you had to have 15 years of average performance, followed by 15 years of great results to be considered. Of the technology companies that did have more than 30 years of history, none showed the specific pattern of good to great we were looking for. Take Intel, for example. It never had a 15-year period of only good performance. It has always been a great company. Now, I suspect if this study were repeated in 10 or 20 years, we would find high technology companies on the list. Question: how do you explain recent difficulties at some of the good to great companies? I get asked this question a lot. It turns out that every company, no matter how great, faces difficult times. There are no enduring great companies that have a perfect, unblemished record. They all have ups and downs. The critical factor, it turns out, is not the absence of difficulty, but the ability to bounce back and emerge stronger. Remember the Stockdale paradox. Furthermore, if any company ceases to practice all of the findings, it will eventually slide backward. It's not any one variable in isolation that makes a company great. It's all of them working together in an integrated package, and most important, consistently over time. Now let me talk about a couple of companies that, at the time of this recording, are having some difficulty. One current case for concern is Gillette, which had produced 18 years of exceptional performance, rising to over 9 times the market from 1980 to 1998. But it stumbled in 1999. We believe the principal source of this lies in Gillette's need for greater discipline in sticking to businesses that fit squarely inside the 3 circles of its hedgehog concept. So what we see with the Gillette case is a company that got it right early on, but later in its history ceased to follow the same discipline to stay within the 3 circles. Now, any company that gets it right early on might slide backwards if it stops doing the right things. Gillette can come back as a great company, in my opinion, if it goes back to the intersection of its 3 circles. Another case, and one that troubles me, is Nucor, which hit its peak in 1994 at 14 times the market, and then it fell off as it experienced management turmoil in the wake of Ken Iverson's retirement. Iverson's chosen successor lasted only a short time on the job, and then he was ousted in this ugly executive suite battle. And one of the architects of the boardroom coup indicated in the Charlotte News and Observer that Iverson had fallen from level 5 leadership in his old age and had begun to display more egocentric level 4 traits. In his heyday, Ken was a giant of a man, this executive said, but he wanted to take this company to the grave with him. On the other hand, Iverson tells a different story. He argues that the real problem is current management's desire to diversify Nucor away from its hedgehog concept, away from the 3 circles. Iverson just shakes his head, wrote the News and Observer, saying it was to get away from diversification that Nucor became narrowly focused in the first place. Whatever the case, the loss of level 5 leadership, or straying from the hedgehog concept, or both, the future of Nucor as a great company remains uncertain at the time of this writing. In order to get back to being great, Nucor will need to cultivate level 5 leadership and get back to focusing on its hedgehog concept. Now, all that being said about Nucor and Gillette, it's worth noting that most of the good great companies are still going strong at the time of this writing. 7 of the 11 companies have thus far generated over 20 years of extraordinary performance, with the median of the entire group being 24 years of exceptional results. And that is a remarkable record by any measure. Question: how do you reconcile Philip Morris as a great company with the fact that it sells tobacco? Perhaps no company is as vilified as Philip Morris, even if a tobacco company can be considered truly great. And I have to say, many would dispute that, including a number of members on the research team. We in fact had great debates about this within the inner sanctum of our research process. But even so, there is doubt as to whether any tobacco company can endure, given the ever-growing threat of litigation and social sanction. Ironically, Philip Morris has the longest track record of exceptional performance from the date of its transition, 34 years. And it is the only company that made it into both of the 2 major research studies, Good to Great and Built to Last. Now, some people will say, of course they have those sorts of results. They sell high-margin products to addicted customers. Anybody would make money doing that. But it turns out that that performance is not a function of being in an industry that sells high-margin products to addicted customers. Philip Morris blew away all the other cigarette companies, including its direct comparison, R.J. Reynolds. But at the same time, we have to say, for Philip Morris to have a viable future will require confronting square on the brutal facts about society's relationship to tobacco and the social perception of the tobacco industry. A large percentage of the public believes that every member of the industry participated equally in a systematic effort to deceive. Fair or not, people, especially in the United States, can forgive a lot of sins, but they will never forget or forgive feeling lied to. Whatever your personal feelings about the tobacco industry, and again, there was a wide range of feelings on our own research team, having Philip Morris in both Good to Great and Built to Last has proved very instructive. It taught me that it is not the content of a company's values that correlates with performance, but the strength of conviction with which it holds those values, whatever they might be. You might not like Philip Morris's values, others might not, I might not. That really doesn't matter. What matters, it turns out, is that they are committed to their values. This is one of those findings that I personally find difficult to swallow, but it is completely supported by the data. If you would like to explore this topic further, I encourage you to look at Chapter 3 of the book Built to Last. Question: what is the role of the board of directors in a transformation from good to great? Well, first, boards play a key role in picking level 5 leaders. The recent spate of boards enamored with charismatic CEOs, especially rock star celebrity types, is one of the most damaging trends for the long-term health of companies. And if this trend persists, if we see a triumph of celebrity over leadership and we maintain our misguided mix-up between those two concepts, we will see very few great institutions in the next century. Boards should familiarize themselves with the characteristics of level 5 leaders, and they should install such leaders into positions of responsibility. Another key thing that boards need to do is to separate, to distinguish between share value and share price. Many boards are hopelessly confused on the distinction between the two. Boards need to understand that they have no responsibility to a large chunk of the people who own their shares at any given moment, namely the share flippers, as distinct from the shareholders. They need to refocus their energies on creating great companies that build value for the shareholder. Managing the stock for anything less than a 5-year period confuses price and value, and is, quite simply, irresponsible to a company's shareholders. I would recommend strongly taking a look at the book Resisting Hostile Takeovers by Rita Ricardo Campbell, published by Prager Publishers in 1997. Ms. Campbell was a Gillette board member during the takeover crises we talked about with Coleman Mockler in the Level 5 Leadership chapter. And she writes about what the responsibilities of the board are and how you wrestle with the question of price and value while facing pressure from outside investors. Question: but I'm not chief executive. What can I do with these findings? It turns out you can do plenty with these findings. Recall the story of the cross-country coach at the end of Chapter 9, who took a good cross-country program and turned it into a great one. She is not principal of the school. She is not athletic director. She is not superintendent of the entire school district. She's a cross-country coach with a limited budget in a sport that most people don't even care about. And yet within that, she was able to create a pocket of greatness. My message to people is, don't worry about the CEO. You can't change that if you're not the CEO. Worry about your own span of responsibility. And if every person with responsibility took it upon themselves to apply these ideas to create a pocket of greatness, and we had pocket upon pocket upon pocket of greatness spread throughout organizations and society, all things would work better. Just get to work. Question: where and how should I begin? First, familiarize yourself again with all the findings. Remember, no single finding by itself makes a great organization or a pocket of greatness. You need to have them all working together as an integrated set. Then work sequentially through the framework, starting with first two, getting the right people on your bus, the wrong people off your bus, and the right people in the right seats. And then moving through all the other major components. Practice the Stockdale paradox, the discipline to confront the brutal facts, yet never losing faith in the end game. Clarify your hedgehog concept. Understand what the 3 circles of your own pocket of greatness are. Create a culture of discipline, and figure out which technologies you can harness to accelerate momentum so that you get eventually that turn by turn by turn accumulation of results that reflects the flywheel concept rather than cascading downwards into the doom loop. Meanwhile, work continuously on your own development toward level 5 leadership. I've laid out this work in a sequence consistent with what we observed in the companies. The very structure of the tape, the very order in which we put the ideas, is a roadmap. I wish you the best of luck on your journey from good to great. Acknowledgements. To say that this work is by Jim Collins overstates the case. Without the significant contributions made by other people, this work would certainly not exist. There are many people I'd like to thank and I don't have time for on this tape. However, I would like to make special mention of people at the top of the list, who are the members of the research team. I was truly blessed to have an extraordinary group of people dedicated to the project. In aggregate, members of the team contributed something on the order of 15,000 hours of work to the project. And the standard that they set for themselves and the quality of their work set a high standard for me to try to live up to. As I struggled with writing the book, And I promise, writing a book is always a struggle. I pictured all the hard-working members of the team who dedicated months and in some cases years to the effort, looking over my shoulder and holding me accountable, challenging me to create a final manuscript that met their standards, worthy of their toil and contribution. I hope this effort meets with their approval. Any failure to reach that standard rests entirely with me. So in our closing, I would like to highlight all the members of the research team. They are Brian J. Bagley, Scott Cederberg, Anthony J. Chiricos, Jenny Cooper, Dwayne C. Duffy, Eric Hagan, Morton P. Hansen, Lane Horning, Christine Jones, Scott Jones, Stephanie A. Judd, Brian C. Larson, Wyja Eve Lee, Nicholas M. Osgood, Vicky Mosur Osgood, Allison Sinclair, Peter Van Genderen, Paul Weissman, Lee Wilbanks, and Amber L. Young. To each and every one of you, I thank you.
We hope you've enjoyed this program from Harper Audio. To order additional cassettes or CDs, or to receive a complete catalog of Harper Audio and Cadman titles, please call us at 1-800-331-3761. You might also try our website, www.harperaudio.com.